Welcome everybody. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to Tim Freke's Big Love 60th birthday party. Thank you for coming. You're all looking absolutely gorgeous. So we invite you to relax, feel playful, so we can celebrate Tim together and celebrate being alive. I am Mrs. Freke, as you may know, and I have known Tim for 23 years. We've had an amazing adventure together. Some of it has been absolutely awesome, some of it has been quite good, and some of it has been absolutely awful. But throughout that time, there has always been a deep love. And for that, I am very grateful. We have brought up kids together, and now they've launched into the world, and we're very, very proud of them. We've lost parents together. We've bought a lot of domestic appliances together. And we've laughed with friends and cried with friends. So on this auspicious occasion of Tim's 60th, I would like to thank him for sharing that time with me. What else? So I would like you to introduce you to Peter Gandy, who you know from the amazing books that the Jesus Mysteries and the Jesus and the Goddess and the Laughing Jesus. So they are an amazing team. Pete is one of his oldest friends, and also Theo is one of his oldest friends from... Did you meet in college or school? Oh, okay, fine. Well, Theo is an amazing singer, and Tim and Theo did music together. So they have a lot of dirt to dish, and I really hope you enjoy their dirt. Have a lovely evening, and look forward to dancing with you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tim's 60th birthday party. Bloody hell, 60. Amazing. So it's lovely to see so many old friends here today. And when I say old, I mean, haven't we known each other for a very, very long time? Very long time. But of everybody, I think I am Tim's oldest friend. And when I say old, I just mean old. Yeah, Tim and I have known each other for 50 years. Can anybody else top that? Can anybody top that? 50 years knowing Tim? Nope, nobody? Right, that's it. I'm officially Tim's oldest friend. Yeah. My mum and Tim's parents were in the same amateur dramatic society in Yeovil. And so we got roped into young theatre. Age 10, something like that. Yeah, 10. And we learnt to do things like, say, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppercorns. I don't know why, but we did. And we learnt to be like trees. And we waved in the wind. Well, it was the 1970s. And the 1960s had just arrived in Yeovil. And we saw each other a bit, but then we were at grammar school together, and Tim was in the year above me, and you don't mix, do you, when Tim was a year older than me. So it wasn't until we were 16, 17, I think it was, and I was wandering down the road in Yeovil with my duffel coat on, hands in pockets. I was a miserable teenager. And I saw Tim, a vision. He had the biggest afro hairdo you've ever seen. I know, it's hard to imagine now, isn't it? But he did. It was the full Hendrix, man. Really, it was. Made Hendrix look like an amateur. And a big cape, all covered in bells. I know, it's crazy. And I think the conversation went something like, "Oh, hi, Tim. Hey, Pete, how you doing?" "I'm all right. What are you doing?" "Well, why don't you come back to my place? I'm trying to work out whether the soul exists or not." I mean, I was brought up on an estate in Yeovil. We didn't use language like that. Nobody expected to reach nirvana or moksha or anything like that. The best you could hope for was a pretty good job at Westland Helicopters and a semi-detached house. So we went back to Tim's place, and he had Buddhas around the place and all kinds of candles and joss sticks and all the rest of it. And then I think it was either then or a little bit later, we read T.S. Eliot's 4 quartets together. Yeah. Somebody was, "Ah." And it was, well, Tim had a thing about T.S. Eliot because he went to East Coker Primary School, and East Coker is where T.S. Eliot's buried. Is that right? Yeah. And Tim's name is T.S. Freke. Whoa, so he must be Eliot come again. And we read 4 quartets together, and it woke me up. I'd have spent my life probably fast asleep. But that poem and meeting Tim woke me up, and it's no exaggeration to say my whole life has flowed from that meeting and that poem. So, yeah, if for nothing else, I thank you, Tim. Really. That changed my whole life. One meeting changed my whole life. So from then on, really, there was just one conversation. What the fuck is going on? What's life about? Does it have meaning? Does it have purpose? Is there a God? Do we have souls? What happens when you die? And it just went on. One conversation, huh? For years and years. Every time, I mean, relationships came and went. Jobs came and went. We lived in different places. But every time we hooked up, we just dropped straight into that place. And we talked. And I remember your dad saying to us, "Greater people than you have asked these questions. And they've never come up with any answers." But that just made us more determined. And the conversation went on for about 20 years, I think, until, out of the blue, Tim wrote a book, or a translation of the Tao Te Ching. Is that right? Yeah, the first thing? Yeah. And then the same publishers, we wrote a couple of proposals together, and this kooky publisher in London said, "Why don't you write a book on mysticism?" Okay, we can do that. Didn't know what the hell it was. But yeah, so we spent a while writing a book, and what the publishers wanted was a book on world mysticism, showing how it's all different, how all these religions, they're all different, and they all dress up in different things and do different things and say different things. But what Tim and I were interested in was they were all saying the same thing. It's all one. everything you think is all just bits and pieces and doesn't hold together and the world will just fly apart. But actually, there is one unifying thing that holds everything together. We had different takes on it. Tim has always been love. That's Tim's thing. My thing was knowledge. Theo's thing was... don't know. Theo doesn't know. Better come up with something soon. You're on in a minute. But yeah. So we got the chance to start writing together. And that was fantastic because that brought all those 20 years of conversations. Suddenly we could bring it all together. And then, out of the blue again, we had an international bestseller on our hands. Wow. We were pretty smug. We got flown to New York. A limo picked us up. And yeah, it was fantastic, huh? And it really was the fulfillment of all of those conversations. It went somewhere, and we arrived at some place. I think he was pretty pleased, actually. I think Tim's dad, even though he's a difficult old sod sometimes, he was really proud of Tim, and he was really proud of us, wasn't he? Yeah. So since then, I've kind of sat back on my laurels thinking, I've published a book. But it's not good enough for Tim. He's carried on since then. It's 2 decades ago now, isn't it? And he's still doing it, turning out those books. He's up to, 300 and... I lost count, mate. But yeah, he's still there. He's still out there doing it. And this evening, he's still doing it. That's his job. He wakes people up. He woke me up. I expect he woke some of you up. Yeah? Yeah, he didn't wake me up. So my life would have been completely different had I not met Tim. And that's why he's given me the opportunity to open tonight. But all I really want to say is, happy birthday, mate. I love you, man. And now, I'm going to hand over to our mate Theo. Because me, Tim, and Theo, we are like the 3 musketeers. Well, without the muskets, obviously. The big hats. And the long leather riding boots. Well, in public. In fact, we're nothing like the 3 musketeers, but there are 3 of us. And we're all great mates, but I am Tim's oldest friend.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, so that's right. There's some people here, and some of them I'm sort of doing that double take you do at a 60th birthday party, where there's people you haven't seen for a long time, and you're like, oh, it's you, that thing, where you don't recognise, because there are some physical changes as you get older. Not many, but some. And there's also, so it struck me, there's a lot of people here who know Tim through working with Tim, and through what he does and what you've done with Tim. And then there's people here who know Tim because we've had a life woven in and out with Tim as a person. So there's like Tim, as he presents as someone who teaches and provides an opportunity for everyone. And then there's Tim, who warts and all in his life, and who you live a life with. And I think that by the end of the next hour or so, the people who haven't known Tim just as a living person who happens to do this will know a bit more about him. And I think that those of us who've known Tim as our living friend and don't really know that much about what it is he goes off and does with everyone, we're going to find out a bit too. So we're all going to have a slightly different picture of Tim by the time we leave tonight. We're going to show a little film in a minute that has some highlights of just stuff that we've managed to pull together, images from Tim's life. I first met Tim when he was, I think, probably 13. I was 14. I ran a little thing called the Third Form Discussion Group at school. And it was really a place where I used to have a little Chairman Mao badge on my lapel, and I was like, get everyone together and talk about the things that really matter, and I'll get them to agree with me. And Tim turned up, and he was, at that time, a kind of a young conservative. And he looked really smart at school. He looked proper, and you might see some pictures of that. And he came in, and he was there among people a year older than him, on his own, prepared. The discussion was, what is communism? And it was all kind of pro, do you know what I mean? And he was there to argue the case for capitalism, and argue the case for competition, and argue the case that selfishness couldn't be got rid of, and so on. And he argued it all the way. And from that point on, I always thought he's something, because it took some courage, actually. And that courage is the courage that he's always shown through his life, which is he's looking for the truth of the thing. I mean, Pete said he's motivated by love, and I can say that that's true. Ever since we got closer, which was later, our whole thing is about how can we get this sense of oneness and love to actually be enacted in the world that we all want to see. But for him, it's not just enough to say that. It's like, what is the vehicle? What's the way that we're going to get there? And everything he's tried, he's tested it to the max and tested it against his own experience. And in the end, he's moved on. It hasn't been good enough. And that's been great to be his mate, because each thing he's looked at, sometimes begrudgingly, he's taken me to. Because after that, we met again and we got into drama. And that's when us three got to know each other. We were doing drama together. Tim had a band. He was a pacifist. He had a band called Warlord. I never understood that. But it was very impressive. He did it to the max. They came on stage. He had his afro and had this huge scene. They had dry ice. They had lights. So I was in a little sort of jazz band, and we were kind of like, but he was like, yeah. And he did this bit where he got crucified. He said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it was all really really big, and committed and all the rest of it. And we went through that. We started talking about souls and truth and how to change the world. We went through this whole process, and I became a revolutionary Marxist. I was went right into that. We also had an interest in a guru. It was kind of, we were teenagers. It was all okay. We could have a guru. We could be Marxists. We could be everything. And we just tried it all. We were looking at it all. And we always came together around that point, but then we were looking for the way through. And Tim went off, I went off to college, and he went off, and I never knew this bit. I used to see Tim and then not see him for whole periods. And he had a whole period when he was in a magical commune called Dodeca Ryan, and they were doing occult work. This is where he was kind of exploring that whole world, Kabbalah and everything, and became quite an expert in it. And also had a load of delusions. I remember him telling me that him and his group had been on the astral, and they weren't sure, but they thought they'd taken Pol Pot out, which I was prepared to think maybe they have. If only Pol Pot hadn't shown up later, it would have been a really good thing. You don't remember it, do you? I knew you wouldn't. It's the kind of thing you really don't like to remember when you're 60, in front of people who think you're really something. That was probably the only thing he got wrong in his entire life, by the way. And then that moved on, and then he got into the Marxism too, and I remember coming back, and him and Elena, who's here tonight, who was a partner with Tim for a long time. They were a fantastic couple. I can remember us having a revolutionary meetings about how we were going to organise the working class in Yeovil, while his parents' cleaner was moving around cleaning stuff. But Tim was always clear that if he inherited the family business, he'd turn it into a workers' co-op, as I understand it. That was his plan. Because his family business was hairdressers, and that was really interesting because it was very local. Freke isn't a weird name like when you see it. Freke, that guy can't be real. No, Freke is an old Saxon name, and particularly in Somerset. And his family were old, and his grandmother cut Thomas Hardy's hair. So, they're good Yeovil stock. But he was pushing against that. And I remember when we once I was back from college, and I was like, come to Tim's. We went over to Tim's, and they were playing this amazing anarchist music he'd made. It was so, I loved it. It was so profound. He always like, wow, he's really reaching like I am for this thing. And then we took these mushrooms, and we all went down to the river, and we had an amazing experience. I had miracles with Tim. We were down at the river, and we were talking about the Gnostics, and me and Pete and Tim thought, we're like the Gnostics. We're like the Gnostic Christians, which he then wrote a book about later, many years later. And I shouted up to the universe, because we were, deep in love, let's say. And I shouted up, I love you, to the universe. And this is true, isn't it, Pete? Tim, suddenly a little voice, as if among the stars, shouted back, I love you too. And that was the kind of thing that happened to me when I was around Tim. Now, probably some wag was on his way back over the bridge, but at the time it was like, oh my God. And the only thing that ruined it was someone coming down and saying, Tim, your parents are back, because we'd had a party at his hairdressing salon, left all the doors open in the high street in Yeovil. It's past closing time, all the lights are on, and there was one friend, wasn't there, sitting there with a record going around, and they'd come in. It was like, oh my God. And like I would have a nightmare now if my daughter did that. But at the time, from the other side, it was great. So then he became, I don't know the order, but he became a revolutionary. And then he was challenging me. He's like, this isn't good enough. And he took Marxism apart in front of me. And I was hating it. I was resisting him all the way. Because I didn't want to make those changes. It's like, I don't know I just want someone to tell me the best. But he's always like, no, that's not quite right, is it? Got to move on. Which is the thing I really value about Tim. It's quite uncomfortable sometimes with Tim when you know him closely, because he's like, why? What? And you're like, oh, Tim, stop. And sometimes he's questioning things. Sometimes he's like these libertarians or people. He's questioning things. You think, Tim, that is really, don't go there, mate. We all know why. Now just leave it. But that incredible quality means that he's never, ever accepted second best. He does things really well. And he also pushes and pushes and pushes. So then when he became a parent, again, he decided, okay, I'm a family man now. And it was quite late in our lives. But it's like, okay, he's really going for this now. He's doing that with the same commitment. And it's a commitment, I'd say, to truth. It's a commitment that is quite fearless and doesn't seem to mind, even if his friends are like, whoa. It's like, no, push on. And it led... Like Pete mentioned that book. The book they wrote, The Jesus Mysteries, for me, that was a huge moment. And this is the sort of thing that I value about my relationship with Tim particularly, apart from the love, is that he's done this to me at times in my life. Because me, him and Pete, we were all brought up in the 60s and 70s. And the Christian tradition was very dominant. So whenever we thought about spirituality or about social change and love, we always had this kind of baggage. It always had to try and fit it in. We had to fit it with Christianity, because Christianity was obviously somewhere back here. It was just how it is. It's true. And he got to this point, and he's deconstructing Christianity in front of me and proving to me that it was a story, a good story, but a story. And I had to go, it sounds weird to me now, but I was really like, can I let go? Can I really let go of the idea that this is the ultimate truth and just say it's a story and I am free to make other stories? And that's where he led me, and that's where he's led a lot of people. It's like, no, we're bigger than that. Our spirituality doesn't need these mediators anymore. I haven't mentioned, we had a guru, me and Tim. We were right into this guru, big time. And then there came a point again where Tim was like, no, this is crap. It wasn't crap, it was really good. It was good. But then this guru got up and he read his poetry at one of the meetings, and we realised that nobody had the courage to say, you're a great guru, stay off the poetry. It was so bad. It was appalling poetry, and no one would tell him. And we were like, oh. And we saw the flaw of that whole system. And another thing I'd like to say, which I think you know about Tim, is that even though he's taught and, he's had many opportunities in his life, and he did start in a relatively privileged background, really. He could have been something else if he just hadn't bloody kept going on about finding the truth. He could have been very successful and retired. He could have been retiring now with a nice little house somewhere, feeling like, what did I do in my life working for ICI? But, and that's not being rude to anyone here, because thank God you've caught up now. If whatever you did with your life, I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just saying He could have done, digging. He could have done anything with his life. But he did what he did with his life. And as a result, he's made the world a much richer place. And he has been, in a way, through many reincarnations. His friends often experienced him. I remember when he was a student, suddenly I was in a bedsit nearby, and I went into his, and he'd moved everything out, and he'd taken all the chairs off the all the legs off the tables, table on the floor. I'm just like 3 cushions. I'm just going to live like Gandhi. That's what he did. He'd fast horrendously seriously. He'd do all these things. He'd try it, and then move on. And I think through that process, he really found something which he's been sharing with a lot of people. And I'm really proud of that, and I'm really pleased for him too, because it's a big world, and maybe when he was young, he thought he'd be like, he thought he might be like John Lennon and change the world. We tried that with some music together. We tried to raise the issue of what was happening to the planet, and back in 1990, on the basis of the Kogi Indians' teaching, which was, if you don't stop what you're doing, you're going to destroy everything. Now it's quite a lot later, and it turns out the Kogi may have been right. We thought they were, and we spent ages and ages on that, didn't we? On those mixes and going round and round. Probably the only time I really hated Tim more than any other, because I worked that closely with him, and we just got so like this, and however hard we tried, we couldn't quite crack this last mix to get this deal. Never quite, because being a musician is very hard, and it wasn't anything wrong with us, it's just really hard to make a break, And we were really stuck. I remember one time, there's a guy called Sean here. Where's Sean? Sean? Oh, he's gone off. He's here. Sean came round. We hadn't really met him before. He said, I know you're doing this project. Sounds interesting. Want to support you. And Tim's like, we can't finish this mix. If we had some speed, we could finish this mix. And Sean, who isn't like this now, mind, he went off, and he came back 3 hours later with a big bag of this white crystalline stuff, which I'd never. And we spent 3 days taking speed and doing a mix. And it was brilliant. And we came up with the most incredible sounds you've ever heard in your life. And then we ended up just looking at each other, just hating each other. Like, what am I doing with this person? I hate them so much. And it took us a long time to get over that, actually. But we did. He always goes through like this way. And he's made many incarnations. But, it's not like because he's a dilettante. He's not like, should I try this? Oh, no, I'm bored. I'll try this. He's like, no, I'll try this to the max. Doesn't work. Then I move on. Something in there is absolutely consistent and solid, when I wish I had half of that commitment, actually. A real commitment which is unwavering. And even when he's down and he's lost and he doesn't know what to do, he is so committed to being down and lost and not knowing. Everybody knows. Everybody feels themselves being dragged down that plug hole of infinite hopelessness. But then he comes back. And then he comes back. That's what he's like. So that's good. So in this little film, you'll see that with those changes, often, perhaps because of the hairdressing thing, often through there went changes of hairstyle. There was afros, there was bleached blonde, there was beard and hairiness, there was all kinds of different things. And ultimately, of course, the hair went. And there's quite a few with wigs as well. And you'll see that Tim has worn various wigs. But I'd just like to say, for all the incarnations of all the different hairdos, all the wigs he's worn in his life, underneath is that shining bald pate. And that shining bald pate shines like a little beacon of truth, because under that skull is one of the mightiest brains it's ever been my privilege to meet. And now I'd like to show you the film, and happy birthday, Tim.
God almighty. Thank you. Thank you. I'm a bit speechless. Thank you, Sean, and everyone who made that film. All those lovely pictures of my kids when they were small, and my mum when she was alive, and my dad, and all the crazy things we've done. And Jenny when she had no hair with me, which I had forgotten. And thank you, Peter, my officially oldest friend, and Theo, who I've travelled so far, but there's so many others who I've known for a very long time in this room, who have been with me as I've experienced it just as my life, but also those key moments, those important moments. So when Deb said, "What are you going to do for your 60th?" It felt like I wasn't going to get away with what I normally say, which is, "Oh, it's fine, but just won't do anything." And it felt like I wanted to do something which was authentic to this journey that's been me. And the journey that's been me, my friends have described, and you've seen a bit of, and all of you know in the way that you've interacted with me. And it also felt like I want it to just be me. And what I've been trying to do with my books and work is to break down that barrier between this name, this guy on a video, and me, as I actually am, and for them to be the same thing. So it felt like, well, why don't we just say, look, if you've known me for years, or you've known me a week, or you don't even know me, you've just read my book, and you'd like to come, it would be such a privilege for you to be here and be part of this event. So what I would like to do is, what I want to do for a little bit, not too long, then we're going to do something together, and then we're going to dance and hang out and chat and just be alive. I just want to start by saying the biggest thing that I see at 60 is this enormous gratitude. This app's just so big I can't begin to put it into words. Sometimes I think, when I hear people who've had near-death experiences, one of the things that happens very often is that you see the whole of your life. And I always think that must be a moment of just to see it, to really see it, to really see what we've been experiencing all this time. From that, all the way through to this. Okay? So that's the biggest thing I want to say, first of all, is just how lucky I am, and how lucky I am I have you in my life, and all the people that are here from years or from recently. More than anything, for Debbie, who rescued me, and has, my aunt Thelma, who can't be here tonight, who's my mum, sister. Whenever we get together, she looks at me and she goes, "How did you do that? I don't know how you did that." And brought family into my life and all of that. And for Paddy, for making Debbie possible. And it's led to now. And the biggest thing I wanted to do was I want to do two things. One, I gather together my people from my life and go, thank you, really, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. But I also wanted to talk about the future, because, as my dear friends have said so eloquently, what my life has been about, my particular journey, right from the age of 12. So the conservative bit was before my awakening. And everything changed. Before that, I can remember when I was 11, I was a young conservative, and I got invited up. I was so active that the local MP, he was a Conservative MP, invited me up to the House of Commons for a dinner. And I remember the richest man in the biggest man in Yeovil, Mr. Pittard, he ran Pittard's glove factory, coming up and getting me to autograph his dinner invite, because he said, one day you're going to be a Conservative Prime Minister, my boy. But shortly after that, I wandered up a hill by our hometown, a hill which some of you have been on with me. Sat on the top of that hill, as I would do with my dog, and looked at the mystery of existence, and something went pop. And there was this profound oneness with everything, and this enormous love, just crying, and a sense of coming home, and all the things which you know, and there it was. And at that moment, everything changed, because I knew I'd touched something which would be the rest of my life. And it has been. The rest of my life has been, how can I get back to that? How can I go deeper into that? How can I share that? Because in that is everything. In that is everything. And how can I understand it? How can I live my life in the light of that? And one way or another, through all these things, I'm doing that ever since. And the very first thing I did when I came down the hill was write about it, because that's what I do. I create things. That's what I've done. I've done this for 60 years. I've just created just so much stuff. How lucky have I been that somehow I've managed to get away with that. I've got away with, I've never had a job. I've just created things non-stop. Hours and hours of every sort of music. There was Lena's here somewhere where, we were at a brass section. We were just like studios and just making stuff and more stuff, and 35 books and shows and just mad everything. And all behind all of it was this. How can we get this? How can we... The first thing I did was write a play, and it just struck me when Peter was talking, Peter was in that play. He was in that play, and it was very controversial, of course, because that's what I do too. And it was in a church, but it was a theatre, and it was called The Wrong Way, and it was about how everything we're doing is the wrong thing. It was going through the whole of history in a kind of surreal way, going, it's the wrong way, it's the wrong way, and it's really about love. And it was controversial because it was all done by kids, and I wrote it and directed it, and Pete was in it, and it got on the TV, and it was just packed, for night after night, it was just packed. And it had swearing in. So it was kids swearing in church. So it was like, oh my God. Because some of it was set in Northern Ireland because the Troubles were happening there. And that was where we're doing this the wrong way it ended up. And my mum, God bless her, had put this script away in that box of things that mums keep. And so when she died, I found it. And honest to God, the last paragraph could have been from one of my books now. In a way. It was just that same... So the love, I think, has stayed the same. And I can't say thank you to them in the room, but they know. I just have to say now, just talk about my mum, just the gratitude to my parents is overwhelming. That they allowed me, that my dad was an old Tory grunt. But he just allowed me to live this life that I've lived, and just supported me and helped me, and God. And here I am at 60, still feeling like I'm 30, 18 probably. And it feels like all of that has come together. And I'm doing exactly what I came to do, if you know what that means. It feels like, I've arrived. And I arrived with Soul Story. It's like, that's it. And now what I'm doing now is trying to pull all that together. So when I wanted to do something for my 60th, what I wanted to do was to gather together friends old and new and say, thank you, I love you, thank you for my life. And this is what I think is happening next for me. And I want to share it with as many people as I possibly can, because I think it's a beautiful thing and I can't believe it's happened. And that is to pull all of the work I've been doing with Awakening and with philosophy and understanding what this is together, and to give it a name and the practices into one thing which you can then look at and go, ooh, I don't like it, or I do like it, or it exists. And the name I've decided to give it is UNIVIDUALism. And that comes from the idea of a unividual. So I want to talk to you a bit now about where I see Tim Freke going in the future, and see what you think of it. I make up words because there's no words for what I want to say. What I think is happening is that we are evolving from individuals into unividuals. And unividuals are individuals that are conscious of unity. The whole of the philosophy that I've been working on for the last whole period is an evolutionary philosophy, which goes, this thing we are in has been happening for 13.8 billion years to get us to this. You know, one of the things that blows my mind is to go, 13.8 billion years ago, what existed was hydrogen, pretty much, a bit of helium. And as my friend Brian Swim says, if you take, what we've learned is, he said, I love the way he puts it, he says, what we've discovered is, if you take hydrogen and you wait long enough, it learns to sing opera. And that's what's happened. It's now, hydrogen has become us talking about hydrogen. That's the vision of what we're in. And the latest thing that's happening in that process is that I think we are becoming unividuals. And I think the evidence for that is everywhere. And I've seen so much of it in my own lifetime. The expansion of the circle of compassion has been enormous. There's never been a time, one of my hats, mainly due to Peter, has been historian, and there's never been a time in the whole of history remotely like this, where people have cared about other people on the other side of the earth, which they'll never ever meet. They're not of the same tribe, they're not of the same culture. There's no reason. In the past, you would have not only not cared about them, you would have been quite happy to take everything they've got. But actually, huge numbers of us now genuinely care, because that sense of unity has reached out to embrace all human beings. Not just with human beings, but with the natural world. Never before have so many people cared about the natural world. We care about animals who are endangered, who would tear us to shreds in a moment. And we'll never see them, apart from in a zoo, maybe. But we care. This is cross-species compassion. We don't notice it happen, but it's huge. We have changed. We are changing. And behind that, underneath that, there's an increasing number of people, and I know this directly from my own work, who are waking up to a fundamental oneness with the universe, that we're not just these isolated little skin bags. That actually, on a deeper level, there's one of us. Everything is one. And what comes with that is this love. This enormous love, because love is how oneness feels. That's why I love you, because I feel a oneness with you. And it's just like that with everyone we feel oneness with. Love is how oneness feels. So I think what I've wanted is to develop a philosophy which can explain and support that evolutionary process. And I've got the beginnings of it. And I think it's pretty strong, because I've pushed it, as like Theo and Pete were saying, I've pushed it really, 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 really hard, and I push it hard every day. And it's still standing. In fact, it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And there's some very simple ideas that underlie it, and I'm going to share a few of them with you tonight, and then, there's loads of stuff you can follow up and find out really what I'm going to say, because it's a complete worldview. And I think, I did this big TED talk, how many people was it? Massive, 1,700 people, something like that. In America, just come back. And I ended it, a very cheeky note, going, look, I think a new understanding of what reality is coming. And I really do. And I think when it comes, it's going to be as big a transformation as the arising of science was 400 years ago. And it will have the same impact. And if you could imagine someone coming here now from that time and seeing this, And the fact that I've got microphones and Bruce has flown in from America and, or Lars, or we can connect on the internet, or all of that, it would be unbelievable. And I think as significant a transformation is starting, but we are the seeds of that. And this will not be about how things work. It's about what this is. And it's not just about cause and effect and the lower levels of evolution, the first levels. It's about the higher levels of evolution, which is this experience we're having right now of the psyche or the soul. So underlying the philosophy that I'm exploring is this recognition that, look, what's happened for the last 13.8 billion years is we've gone from very primitive states of matter into the creation of the whole universe, that took 10 billion years, into the whole ecology of life. How extraordinary is that? All of life comes from one, well, I mentioned Bruce, he's working on how the hell that happens, and he's come across to be here. And then from that has come this experience we're having of sensation, and then consciousness, and then something completely remarkable, which we just take for granted, but let's for a moment not. We're having the experience of psyche. You're having an experience of this other dimension made up of thoughts and images and memories, and it's not made of matter, and you're in it all the time. Peter said all that time ago, our relationship started by me going, I'm trying to work out whether we've got the soul or not. Well, I've come to a conclusion. And the conclusion is, what's happened really, actually doing the work with him on the Jesus Mysteries, I went back into what do these words fucking mean? And I went right back into the Greek, and they had this idea that your body and a soul. And the body is nice and easy. That's your physical, and then there's the psyche. And the word psyche, which we use now, it just means soul. The soul is what you are. You're experiencing it right now. You could never not be experiencing soul. It's the dimension in which you're hearing the meaning of these words. One of the things I love to do, try this, is just go, look, you're experiencing always body and soul. You're experiencing a flow of sensation, which is your body, and you're flowing a flow of imagination, which is your soul. You're always experiencing that. That's what you are. One is made of matter, one is not in your experience. Have a look. But the old teaching that your body and soul, if you get rid of all the theology over the top, is a statement of the obvious. It's just a statement of what's in front of you all the time. You're those two things. Oh, yes. You're something biological, and you're something other. So if you look at me now, if you look at it with your sensations, you can see that what you're witnessing here is a monkey wearing clothes, making funny noises. But in psyche, in soul, you're discerning meaning, because that's where meaning arises. So this whole process of evolution we're in has gone from primitive matter up to non-material soul. That's what's happened. And I think if we can understand that properly, and we're going to have to get into this another time, but I think if you could define this properly, we can heal the division between science and spirituality, actually. One of the great problems for me when Pete says I push things is like what I see I see that we're trying to heal that division right now, but I don't think it's successful. And the reason it's not successful is because the great truths of spirituality are being missed out. Yeah, it's easy to go, it's all one. Okay, science says that, spirituality says that, yeah, done. It's easy to go to the quantum world where things are a bit weird and going, that's weird, maybe that's where spirituality works. I don't think that works either. But this evolutionary picture, I think, can say to you, look, what's happened is we have evolved onto more and more emergent levels. And on these more emergent levels, soul has come into existence. And with soul has come a whole load of properties. Just like with life came a whole load of things that never existed before. Senses, eating, fear, all sorts. That never existed before. With the existence of soul, a whole load of other things arose. Really important other things which we're in. So I want to throw at you 2 or 3 of those. And just because that feels all I can do right now. So one of the things that with that question of what is this, I want to give you an answer to that tonight, at least for you to think about. What this is we're in, it seems to me, is the realization of potentiality on ever more emergent levels. That's what this is. That is what this is. And look, it's happening now. Every moment, when I look at the moment, look with me, every moment is the realization of a new potentiality that's never happened before. Every one. Every one. And every one builds on what's just happened. That's its nature. And it's been doing that for 13.8 billion years. And because each one builds on what's been before, it becomes more emergent, more emergent, more emergent. And then within that process, there's moments where it goes, and you get a whole new thing come into existence, which has never existed before. And it's through all of those million steps that we got from hydrogen to me having this conversation with you. That's how we've done it. And it hasn't stopped. It hasn't arrived. It's happening right now. And it's happening now fastest in the soul. That's where most of the action's taking place. And because that's what's brought all of this. Thoughts, imagination has created all of this. And it's also where this philosophy is coming from right now. So, what that leads me to is two things. One is, look, if we want to look to understand the purpose of this, maybe we can look at what the nature of it is. So my suggestion is, rather than seeing life as having a purpose, my suggestion is that purpose is actually integral to what this is that we're in. Because its purpose is to realize itself on ever more emergent levels. That's what it's been doing for all of these billions of years. So what does that mean for you and me? Well, I just think it means the same. It means we can try and realize our potentials on ever more emergent levels. We can look inside ourselves and go, well, how can we individually and collectively, how can we bring something greater into existence? How can we be more? What is the greater thing? And for me, the greater thing is to wake up to this deeper sense of who we are and this big love. And then to bring that in any way we can. That's what we're doing. So a little thought, just because it's my birthday. One of the things is, when I look at this moment, I see it has these two qualities. I've mentioned them already, but I want to just look at them one more time. One is that every moment contains within it implicitly the potentiality for everything that could happen. And every moment contains within it, implicitly, everything that has already happened. So what I would like to say as I come to be 60 is, it seems to me the past has not gone anywhere. Nothing has been lost. Actually, the past is here with us. This is the past. This is the past meeting the possible. That's what it always is. And everything that has ever been exists here. Everything. Without it, this moment would not be this moment. The moments we met, the moments we first, the moment we learned to speak, all those pictures, the little Tim and all the crazy shit and all of that, and then back, and then the evolution of humanity, and then back, and then back, and everything is here. Which means, it seems to me, that this thing we're in is not in time, but it's made of time. It's actually made of the fabric of the past. And that therefore what you're meeting right now is everything that Tim has been for 60 years. And I'm meeting everything you've been. That's what's happening. And that therefore we exist in each other. And this will always exist in us. It will always be us. Final thought. This is a big thought to say quickly, but I'm going to try. I think what has happened in this evolutionary process is that a whole domain of existence, which spirituality has been exploring forever, has evolved from the lower levels of existence. That's essentially what I think has happened. And we are in all of it right now. And what marks out soul, what marks out psyche, just as in the world of atoms and physics and biology, things relate through cause and effect. Thank goodness. But in the soul, in the world of the psyche, the imagination, things relate through meaning, forming narratives, conceptual narratives. The suggestion I want to play with is that actually basic matter has evolved into a story. It's evolved into a story, which is why when I meet you, I go, "Hello, how's your story? Wow, I haven't seen you and my story for ages, and your story's been carrying on all that time." Because I don't think it's just that we tell stories. I think that we are stories. We are made of everything we've done, every thought we've had, everything we've been. That's what we are. That's why they matter to us so much. So that the past is accumulated of that story. So here I am at 60, looking back over my story with all of you beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people who've come from over the world to be here, going, wow, how lucky am I? Because I have been. I mean, there's been some shit bits. But overwhelmingly, I know how lucky I am. And because of that, I just want to do everything I can to take out a positive, hopeful message. I want to be able to stand up and say the simple things. Here's the thing. When I enter the deep awake state, which I did when I was 12, which I do so often, which many of you have been with me as we've dived into it, which we're going to go into in half an hour, what arises for me is these deep intuitions, which is really the only thing I claim to know. The rest is just like, this is my best guess, guys. What do you think? And the things I want to say are so childlike and naive. Those things. There's a confession in Soul Story near the end where I go, look, really, all this intellectual scaffolding is to hold up these naive statements like, despite everything, life is good. Something good is going on here. Life is good, and death is safe. It's okay. I know it doesn't look, it is. And what really matters is love. And there's a place in me, I hope there's a place in you where I just know that's true. But how can you hold up your head and say things like, yes, I think life is good, death is safe, and all that matters is love in Glastonbury without sounding like, oh, for fuck's sake. It just, so what I've wanted and what I hope I can offer you, should you want to come and play with me, is I think we can have an intellectually robust philosophy, and that we need that. It's not good enough to think in unclear ways, because you will act in unclear ways, which can actually mean we can change the world we're in, actually change it. And I think we can hold our heads up and go, no, actually, it is a perfectly reasonable and rational and sound thing to say, life is good. This is why, because it's evolving towards the good. Death is safe, yes, because the evolution of the psyche saw the evolution of immortality, and that's not a crazy, wacky idea. It makes sense if you think that through like this, and it can make sense of more of your experience. And that, yes, life is magic, and great things happen, and synchronicities occur. And, oh God, there's been so many I could tell you. Many have happened with you. Because life is also a story. It's also cause and effect, but it's become a story, which is why it's like a dream sometime and then others it's not. Because it's both of those at once. And we can get this. And that if we do, if that new worldview comes in, as I think it will, over this next period, however long that is, it will change how human beings experience their lives, and it will change how we live together profoundly. So the reason I've wanted to do this is to go, right, okay, so this is it for me now. I want to do everything I can to share these ideas as best as I can, and I want to do it in a way which is free from the old spiritual ideas. I don't want to be talking about enlightenment, all of that stuff. I don't want the Eastern guru thing. I don't want to pretend that I'm something I'm not. I'm going to be Tim, just as he is, an evolutionary thing, gets things wrong, get things right. You can talk to me, mates, find out the shit. And then together, maybe we can enter this deep space and take something beautiful out into the world. And I want you just to sink into the deepest place in yourself, whatever that means to you. Just to sink into that big, big, spacious presence at the depth of your being. And if you've experienced that enormous oneness, to remember that experience and to reconnect with that enormous oneness. And with the oneness, that huge love, that big, all-embracing love that just holds everything, all the joy and suffering, everything.